Fine. Thank you. This one. This is the pointer.
Red button is the answer.
And it's forward.
Right? That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Bishop, this is a module finished. Yes, Bishop and now this yes, because the other sessions haven't finished. Well, your talk is this is plenary talk, but we haven't finished it. So we can wait. Yeah. Your auditorium is much larger.
Yeah. The maximum capacity is of 250. This is what
I thought it was less than exactly. But do you
a lot of people.
tomorrow you're going to experience?
Where will they locate?
No, I think that it's accessible.
But they are not early.
Our parents come.
And then we'll have lunch together.
Yes, 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 yes. Carlos won't leave.
Yeah, Carlos is going to God.
His weekend trips.
Yes.
Oh, yes. He also wants to be case crazy things like that. He's very crazy. Like former advisor of
Nikki.
that guy, I have heard of. He was
But he comes.
no, Carlos is.
Yes, something like diamond diamond. Any conference?
They're using students during the road because this is home for them. ¿Ya acabó? Pero no es here, that means it's here. Yes, it's so happy. His mother is yes, emergency treatment is once, and then regular treatment because it was a few times. The next one. I don't think that's questions for questions. He's trying to come here. Yes. I am pushing for him to stay here several weeks, but I don't know how long this is taking. He said to me that if something happens, then he wants to cancel. Yes, yes, he's one of this. He has spent years already for months because he started he started right away. First of September, he started. So it has been started for 2 months. He went to send it.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked him so guys, so I come to India to visit my parents. So I don't have time. That's understandable. He comes to spend time with his parents. Especially he's on sabbatical and he has no time to do it.
I think we are co-advising on PhD student. So that's professional. Yes, about this deal.
Yeah.
And yeah. Also, I consider and it's time to start. So, welcome everybody to our plenary conference, Computer Science, during this CCE 2015 conference. So, we are very pleased to present Professor Polar Starker from the Applied Statistical Unit of Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata, India. So, I will read some brief biography of Professor Sarkar. Polar Sarkar received his Bachelor of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering degree from Jadavpur University in Kolkata in 1991, and the Masters of Technology in Computer Science from Indian Statistical Institute in Kolkata in 1993. He received a PhD degree from Indian Statistical Institute in 1999, and since June 2005, Professor Sarkar is a professor at the Indian Statistical Institute. His research interests include cryptology, discrete math, and computer science. He was the recipient of the prestigious Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award for Mathematical Science for the year 2011, and the co-recipient of the B.M. Birla Award for Mathematics for the year 2005. So we are very pleased to present Professor Sarkar, who is going to talk about digital signatures, a panoramic view. Please.
Okay, yeah, so the microphone works. So thank you, Francisco, for the kind introduction. And thanks, of course, for inviting me, and which gives me the opportunity to visit Mexico and similar stuff. So I've been collaborating with their group over the years on several works, also with Francisco. This is the first time I'm able to make it here. So thanks, yes. So my talk is going to be on digital signatures. Now, as Francisco mentioned, that it's supposed to be a plenary or a keynote talk. Now, for such a talk, I thought that maybe I should try to give a broad-based talk rather than speaking about any particular topic on which I have actually worked on. So, so I gave it a very ambitious title of a panoramic view. Now, those of you who take photographs, you know that the panoramic view is necessarily a wide-angle view. And any wide-angle view distorts. So there will be some distortion. So that's the caveat stuff. Okay. So I want to talk about several things. Of course, we'll start with public key encryption and digital signatures, some brief background on that. I'll give you two examples of digital signatures. kind of basic examples. The RSA-based digital signatures and the elliptic curve digital signature algorithms. These are the two most popularly used signature algorithms right now. We'll talk about how digital signatures actually work in the internet, which will bring up this idea of public key infrastructure. And then comes Bitcoins, which is in the last 5-7 years is the most interesting application of practical application of digital signatures that have come up. So I'll spend a few slides talking about Bitcoins a bit. Also to emphasize how Bitcoins avoid using public infrastructure. So this first four topics will be kind of a generic overview kind of thing. The next two is going to be more academic oriented. So there are people here who would be interested in taking up research in digital signatures. For them, I'd like to say something. So these two would be more academically oriented. And if you're not really into, if you don't really want to get into digital signatures, this would be a good time for you to take a little nap. I'll wait you when we come back to the more interesting things about e-commerce and law and information technology act and so on. And then I'll try to finish off with some real world attacks on PKI. Some things, how PKI has actually been attacked. Well, by essentially bypassing the cryptography that has been put there. So that would be also, so these two things should be of more interest. Okay, so let's start with the background. So the background science, of course, is cryptology. And broadly speaking, one can think of two basic tasks, encryption and authentication. And I mean, if you're already a cryptologist, you know this. But if you're not, then you may have heard of things called asymmetric key or public key crypto system. So two basic notions or two basic approaches to designing cryptography. These are very broad classifications. So one is this conventional or classical notion, which is secret or symmetric key crypto system, which was the only notion of cryptography until the 1970s. And in 1976, Diffie and Hellman came up with the seminal paper, New Directions in Cryptography, which gave this paradigm shift of introducing asymmetric key crypto system, at least in the public world. In the confidential world, in the government world, this was supposedly proposed earlier. We need not bother about that. There are three things that constitute asymmetric key crypto system, three broad things. Public key agreement, public key encryption, and digital signatures. I'll talk a bit about public key encryption and mostly about digital signatures. Public key agreement I'll skip for this talk. Now, this is not to suggest that that public key encryption systems or asymmetric key crypto systems have superseded symmetric key crypto system. In practice, it's actually a combination of symmetric and asymmetric key crypto systems that are used. But for this talk, we won't be talking about symmetric key crypto systems at all. Okay, so here is a brief one-slide overview of what is meant by public key encryption. I'll try to explain this a bit for the benefit of some people who may not be familiar with crypto. The basic task in crypto, of course, is for a sender. So in this case, Alice, who wants to send a message M to Bob. So this dashed line, this represents the transmission of the message M from Alice to Bob, and the requirement is basic requirement is confidentiality. So you want to send a message across, but you don't want anybody else, typically called an adversary, to learn this message, and you do not have a means or a communication medium which is controlled only by Alice and Bob. So you have to send this message over a public channel, so-called public channel. You have to transfer. Think of this as a bit sequence, which you have to send over a public channel, so that anybody who has access to the public channel can get to know this message M. Now, if you want confidentiality, you cannot directly send it. So you do it via this procedure. So apply a transformation called encryption. on the message to produce what is called a ciphertext, which is sent across the public channel. And then that is decrypted by Bob to get back the original message. So these two, this encryption and decryption, these two transformations are inverses of each other. And designing these transformations constitute essentially the task of a cryptographer. Now, this encryption and decryption, these are parameterized by keys. This is a PK and an SK. In the conventional model of cryptography, this symmetric crypto system, these two would be same and both would be secret. The paradigm shift proposed by Diffie and Hellman is that the encryption key can be made public. So anybody can encrypt a message, which would be sent across the public channel. And there is a corresponding secret key, which only Bob would know. And this secret key will allow the decryption of the ciphertext to the original message. So this differentiating between the public key and the secret key, that is the most ingenious idea that was proposed by Diffie and Hellman, though they could not give a solution to it. That was given by Lewis, Shamir, and Edelman, the RSA crypto system. So, the receiver Bob has a public key and a secret key. The public key is published in a public directory, so everybody knows the public key, and only Bob knows the secret key. So this is how encryption works. And we look at digital signatures, which is what the content of this talk is about. Well, in a digital signature, the goal is different. The goal is not to obtain the confidentiality of the message. So the message, and Bob is not concerned about hiding the message. What Bob is concerned about, or rather what Alice is concerned about, is that Bob says, and this is an instruction that Bob signs. So things like, so Bob tells a bank to pay some amount of money to Alice, so typically a check. So you are not really bothered about the confidentiality of the check. Though that could be an additional concern, but that's not the basic concern when you sign a check. When you sign a check, what you really want to do is to be able to say that, well, Bob has signed the check telling the bank that he pay a certain amount of money to Alice. So how do you do that in the digital world? Well, that's the basic, and that's what digital signatures try to capture. So when, again, there is this public channel, but here the message M is, and the goal is not to hide the message M. So you have two transformations, the sign and verify, or two algorithms really. So this message M is signed by Bob using what is called a secret key or a signing key of Bob. So only Bob knows the signing key. So Bob will apply this signing key and will apply the signature algorithm with the signing key to the message M and produce this signature sigma. So this sigma is the signature of Bob on the message M. And this is what will work. Okay. Now, who can verify? Well, anybody can verify. Anybody can run this algorithm. This is a verification algorithm. Anybody can run this algorithm. And there is a corresponding verification key, which is the public key of Bob. So run the verification algorithm with the public key of Bob on this message signature pair. And this verification algorithm will say whether this is a properly signed message or not. So the answer is going to be yes or no. Okay, so that's the goal of digital signatures. And I mean, as we can see, it's different from that of encryption. Now, in many typical scenarios, you require both. So both encryption and signatures. And there are ways of dealing with that, something called sign encryption. So maybe I'll briefly talk about it later. But the main goal here is to sign a particular message. So Bob signs a message, and that is done in this in the setting of public key crypto system, where there is a public key which is available to everybody, and there is a signing key which is available only to Bob. So a digital signature scheme will consist of three procedures. There is a setup procedure which generates the public key and the secret key for Bob. This public key is made public. It is placed in a public directory. Everybody gets to know it. There is a signature algorithm, a signing algorithm. Bob signs a message in using the secret key, using his secret key to obtain signature sigma. And Alice or any other party can verify the validity of this message signature pair using the public key of Bob. And for verification, no secret information is required. Okay. Now, when we talk about signatures, well, we're talking about sending a message. The message can be long. Most signature schemes are based on algebraic operations, number theoretic operations, or operations on things called elliptic curves and so on. So these are computationally expensive operations. So if you are trying to sign a very long message, then the signing time goes up quite a lot. So the engineering solution to this is to use what is called a hash then sign paradigm. So what does this do? Well, if you want to send a long message, you apply a hash function to the message to produce a short digest. So what is a hash function? Hash function is a function which will take in a bit string, a long bit string, and produce a short fixed length bit string. And the fixed length could be 160-bit, 256-bit. These are the two standard things. It has to satisfy certain properties, like collision resistance. So it should be computationally difficult to find two messages which map to the same value. Of course, there will be such things because your domain is larger than your range. So there will be collisions, but it should be difficult to find them. If it is indeed possible to find such things, then if you are trying to design a signature scheme based on such a hash function, then that will be insecure. So the hash function, the function which maps these bit strings to short strings, must be collision resistant. It must also be pre-image resistant in the sense that if you're given a digest, it should be computationally difficult to find the pre-image which maps to this digest. Okay, and there are some standards. NIST is this it's the standardization body of the United States. They have standardized certain hash functions. SHA-1. SHA-1 is no longer considered to be secure. SHA-2 is considered to be secure. It has two options of producing 256-bit digests or 512-bit digests. And very recently, NIST has concluded a multi-year competition to select a new hashing algorithm called SHA-3. So how the entire hash then sign paradigm works is, you have this long message, you hash it into a short value, and then apply the signature scheme on the short value. Now we come to examples of digital signatures. I'll talk about two examples, as I mentioned, the RSA and the ECDSA. Well, this is the basic RSA signature scheme. For actual applications, this need to be, and there are more details that would be required. So there are three algorithms for any signature scheme: setup, sign, and verify. In the RSA signature scheme, well, setup will be performing these operations, and it will come up with a public key or the verification key and a signing key D. So this E and D are two integers such that ED is congruent to 1 mod phi of n, where phi is the Euler quotient, which gives you the number of integers between 1 and n minus 1, which are co-prime to n. And n itself is a product of two primes, p and q, where two are put safe primes because there is a lot that needs to be said about how to choose these primes. And in addition, there is a hash function h, which maps bit strings. So this is the hash then sign paradigm, which would map bit strings to this set, 0 to n minus 1. So this is the verification key. This is made public, and this is the secret key, which Bob keeps to himself. How to sign? Well, your message m is a bit string. You first hash it to get an integer between 0 and n minus 1, call it y, and then just raise y to the power d. D is the signing key. So y to the power d mod n. Well, this is the signature. Signature on m is sigma. And well, verification is again, the message is not a secret. So the person who is trying to verify the message can apply this hash function h to m and to get y, and accept if and only if sigma to the power e mod n is y. And this works because sigma to the power e is y to the power d to the power e, which is y to the power ed mod n, which equals y. This requires a different argument. We'll skip that. So this is simple enough. And signing is essentially one exponentiation modulo n, and verification is also one exponentiation modulo n. So that's the computational cost of signing and verifying. And security, well, there is a lot to be said about security of RSA signatures, but fundamentally it is based on the assumption that factoring a suitably chosen composite number is computationally hard. So if you can choose your primes, P and Qs appropriately, then this decomposing n as P into Q is hard. See, P and Q are once they are chosen once for all, and then you don't need them anymore. Now, how hard it is? Well, that depends on the size of the integer. So 1024-bit n currently is considered to be to provide about 80-bit security. The recommendation is n. There are various recommendations. You go up to 2048 or 4096 bits modulus. The only thing is that as you increase the size of your modulus, these two operations become more and more costly. So these exponentiations, this and this, they become more and more costly. So there is a trade-off. You just cannot arbitrarily increase the security. You also need to think of the efficiency. Okay, so this is the basic RSA signature scheme. Then I would like to talk about ECDSA, and that involves elliptic curves. So this is a one-page summary of elliptic curves. And as I said, any panoramic view will distort. So this is, I hope it will give you some idea of what it means, but this by no means complete. Okay. So we will have as the underlying algebra a finite field FQ, and then look at such a curve. So this is y squared equals x cubed plus ax plus b. This is called an elliptic curve with certain conditions. And what we're interested in is, or rather, are pairs alpha beta. So alpha and beta are elements of FQ which satisfy this equation. So beta squared is alpha cubed plus a alpha plus b. So we're interested in pairs alpha beta elements of FQ which satisfy this equation. Then it can be shown that EFQ forms an abelian group, and you don't do your cryptography over the entire group. Cryptography is done over a large prime order, and hence cyclic subgroup of EFQ. Now, how to choose this group, how to choose this curve, and so on. Well, there is a lot of deep theory behind it, which is not required for our purposes. And this, as I mentioned, characteristic not equal to 2 or 3. Well, if characteristics is 2 or 3, then there are other forms of elliptic curves. You don't use this equation, you use something else. But I think what the main point here is you'll be interested in pairs of elements of finite fields satisfying such equations. And these form an abelian group. With this background, we can get into this NIST standard ECDSA, elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. And this is a very bare description. There are lots of details that I've skipped on how to choose the curves and so on and so forth. First is that there are some domain parameters. This will be shared by all users who use this ECDSA. These domain parameters would involve this Q. Q would define this finite field FQ. Q could be a large prime, and for the purpose of understanding this talk, just consider Q to be a large enough prime. So FQ is the field of cardinality Q, and you have an elliptic curve E over FQ. And as I mentioned, that cryptography would be done over a suitable subgroup of EFQ. Let G be the generator of this subgroup. So E, Q, E, and G, and N, of course, is the order of this subgroup. So these are the parameters which are associated with the elliptic curve. In addition, we have a hash function H. Okay, so that's the domain parameters. So all users would be having these domain parameters. To set up, well, the signing key is D, and the verification key is this Q. So the signing key is an integer chosen uniformly at random between 1 and n minus 1. So you got the 0, but the group order is n. So you choose an integer between 1 and n minus 1, and that's going to be your signing key. And the verification key is going to be D times G. So the group is written arithmetically. It's G plus G plus G up to D times. Okay, so signing and verification, these are the algorithms. Look a little complicated. I'll try to explain them a bit. So the message M is, the message is still M, and the signature on M is RS. These are two integers, modulo N. How are these obtained? Well, first you hash the message to get E, and then do something on E to get this S. Okay, so what do you do on E? Well, you see, this is where this signing key comes in, this D, which is the signing key. It comes in here. And it also involves an R and a K. Well, the K is chosen uniformly at random from 1 and n minus 1. And R is, well, once you choose K, then you do G plus G plus G K times. And that will give you a point on the elliptic curve. And this point on the elliptic curve will be two elements of FQ, which you call X1, Y1. And think of Q as a large prime. So these are going to be elements in the finite field. So they're going to be integers between 0 and Q minus 1. And let R be X1 modulo n. So there you get this integer R modulo n. So R is going to be between 0 and n minus 1. And then S is K inverse E plus dr modulo n. So the signature on M is R and S. Verification is essentially to recreate from this, from M and S, try to recreate this R. That's essentially what this verification algorithm does. So I won't get into the details. I mean, you can recreate this E, of course, by applying the hash function to M, and then do some computation to get this V. And if V equals R, so your recreation of R has been successful, then the message signature pair is accepted, else it is rejected. Correctness follows from just a few simple algebraic steps, which skip for a moment. It's not important. So the cost here, the essential cost here is this K times G, so G plus G plus G K times. This is called a scalar multiplication. So signing costs one scalar multiplication, and verification, well, here is this operation of getting X, which is U1 G plus U2 Q. U1 and U2 are two integers, modulo n. So this is again G plus G plus G up to U1 times, and this is adding Q to itself U2 times. So these are two scalar multiplications. So verification takes two scalar multiplication, while signing takes one scalar multiplication. That's the cost. Well, the security of ECDSA is based on the fact that the discrete log problem, the so-called discrete log problem for certain elliptic curve groups, is computationally difficult. And well, factoring also I mentioned is computationally difficult, but there is a difference between the computational difficulty. For factoring, there are what are called sub-exponential algorithms. So while they are not very efficient, they are somewhat efficient. Whereas for the discrete log problem on certain properly chosen elliptic curve groups, you do not have anything other than essentially trying a nice search, which is also called the Pollard's rule algorithm. So I mean, to put it in broad perspective, solving the discrete log problem on elliptic curve is assumed to be more difficult than solving factoring. And very broadly speaking, that would be the current state of knowledge. And since this is considered to be more difficult, the advantage is that one can work with smaller size groups. So your Q can be much smaller than this 2048-bit RSA modulus. Hence, your keys, your signatures, etc., everything is shorter, and also the signing and verification algorithms are shorter. So if you have been using your net or anything, then as I talk about it a little later, you probably have used the RSA signature, which is, I think, still the RSA is mostly used, or maybe the ECDSA, even without you knowing it. It's not that we don't get to use it, we are using it without actually knowing it. Okay, now comes the issue of public key infrastructure. So how to trust a public key? As I mentioned, that there is an issue that, so Bob wants, I mean, you can think of it as two ways, one in terms of encryption, the other in terms of signatures. So suppose Bob wants to send a message to Alice, encrypt the message, and send it to Alice. So Bob will be using Alice's public key, PKA. Bob is on the net, there is somewhere, Alice is somewhere. Okay, so Bob gets the public key of Alice, encrypts the message using Alice's public key and sends it. In good faith that Alice is the only person who can decrypt. Now, a classical man in the middle would be that if someone comes in between Alice and Bob, and if puts out a public key, say PKE, saying this is the public key of Alice. Right? So how does Bob know? Which, I mean, that this is the public key of Alice, how does Bob determine that? So if Bob gets PKE instead of PKA, well, he encrypts this message using PKE, but then if can decrypt it. So there is no security. So all the security, etc., this completely vanishes. In the context of signatures, so what if can do is, if can sign, well, if puts out a public key in the name of Alice, says PKE is Alice's public. Then she signs a message using the corresponding secret key and sends it to Bob. So Bob gets this PKE, thinks this is the public key of Alice, and verifies. Then what Bob gets is that he gets a message signature, and which verifies. So he gets a message signature pair, which shows to him that Alice has sent. So unless he can trust that this public key that he is using, this actually belongs to Alice, the whole system fails. Okay? So this is one of the fundamental problems of public key cryptography. So this is the man in the middle or woman in the middle, whatever you prefer. So if impersonates Alice, it's just an impersonation attack. Puts a public key in the name of Alice and signs. So this is in the context of signature. So if puts a public key in the name of Alice and signs a message in using the secret key, corresponding secret key, and Bob verifies the signature using PKE, and he thinks is Alice's public key. So when can Bob trust that the public key is indeed that of Alice? Well, this problem has been solved using what is called a certifying authority. So you need an authority which is trusted by Bob. So here is a CA. What the CA will do is it will certify public keys. So Alice has a public key. Alice will send the public key to the CA. The CA is supposed to do a physical verification that this person is indeed Alice. If somebody claims I'm Alice, well, that person is indeed Alice. The CA is supposed to do that physical verification, and then CA has its own public key and signing key. It will use a signing key to sign Alice's public key and send back what is called a certificate to Alice. The certificate will consist of many things, but essentially it is the signature of the CA on the public key of Alice. Okay. Now when Bob wants to communicate with Alice, Bob will ask for Alice's public key. Alice will send her public key along with the certificate that she has received from CA. Now Bob has the public key of the CA. So this must be an authenticated channel. So Bob somehow has to trust the public key of CA. So what Bob will do is Bob will use the public key of CA and then verify the CA signature on the public key of CA. So this is the certificate, this is the signature of the CA on PKA. So Bob will use the public key of the CA to verify the CA signature, which is cert A on PKA. If this verifies, then Bob has trust that this public key indeed belongs to Alice. And then Bob can do this usual, send the ciphertext and use the public key for usual purposes. So this initial verification procedure is required. So the thing is, okay, so here is this in more details. So CA would have a key pair, public key C and SKC and so on. So the main thing is that Bob has to trust the public key of the CA. And if Bob trusts the public key of the CA and the signature algorithm is secure, then Bob will trust the public key of Alice. This is how things work. Now, there is an issue about management of certificates. So the CA is issuing certificates. The certificates are issued not for free, of course. This is a business model. So certificates have a cost, and they are not issued for lifetime. They have a validity period. So the certificate is issued for a year and then it expires. Or maybe for some reason Alice could have lost her private key. Somehow it has become compromised. And then she informs the CA, this public key no longer works. This certificate is no longer valid. So Bob has to know that the certificate that Alice produces is fresh, that it is the current certificate of Alice. How will we get to know that? There are several ways of doing that. And this is the certificate derogation list. So the CAs maintain what is called a certificate derogation list. This is the list of all certificates that the CA has revoked. Now that has lots of problems. So the certificate, designing proper certificate revocation list is a problem, and then there is a solution to it. This online certificate status protocol. You can make an online query to the server and check whether the certificate is fresh or not. So each one of them will have its own advantages and disadvantages and so on. But there is clearly a need for management of certificates. So it's not, and certificates is not the end of the story. There is a clear need for management of certificates. And the entire thing is called public key infrastructure. The standard, accepted standard is X.509. It's roughly the certificate format. These are several things. The signature algorithm ID, so it could be RSA or ECDSA. I think these are the two standard algorithms that are used. And several things. The most important thing is the certificate owner's public key and the CS signature on all of this. So this is, these are all blah blah things, documentary and kind of bookkeeping information. But the main thing is the certificate owner's public key and the CS signature on everything. These two would constitute the certificate for a particular user. Okay. Now, talking about public infrastructure will be complete without saying how it actually works in practice. So, again, these are broad topics. I've just summarized them into two bullet points. The transport layer security, and its predecessor was this secure sockets layer, and both are sometimes together called SSL. The goal is to create a secure channel between a client and a server. So how does TLS work? How does TLS work? Well, the client opens a connection to the server and then asks for the server's public key. Okay. So the server sends its public key and its certificate, and the client authenticates the server certificate using the public key of the relevant CA. So this public key and certificate would have been signed by a particular CA. So the client would authenticate that. So the client could be a browser, for example. It would authenticate that certificate using the corresponding public key of the CA. Now, once that is done, then the client knows it is working with, and it trusts the server. The server could also be asking the same thing from the client. Now, once this mutual authentication has been established, what the TLS protocol will do is, what the client will do is, client will take a random value, encrypt it using the public key of the server, and send it across. Well, then the server can decrypt it, get back that random value, and then both of them have the same random value. They apply some transformation to it, you get a secret key, and then use symmetric key encryption to communicate. And they have created a secret channel. Via this authentication and this transfer of secret, they have created an authenticated secure channel between the client and the server. Well, HTTPS writes piggyback on TLS. So this is an HTTP connection that is open between a browser and a server. It uses TLS to create a secure HTTP connection. So your HTML code that is flowing across, it will first go through this TLS protocol. So TLS will do this certificate verification, and once that is done, well, then things are encrypted and sent across. So if you are using your credit card for some online transaction and so on, well, then you're using a site marked with HTTPS, and that would be using TLS to secure your connection. So as I said, that even if you don't realize it, and digital signatures are there. It's part of this authentication of the server. I'll talk about two other tools. These are free tools, and one of the reasons I talk about them is that they're free. This GPG and Tor. Okay, so GPG is this GNU privacy guard. So this is a free tool which actually allows you to do this public key signing, encryption, and so on. It gives you a lot of functionality. You can download it, you can install it, and then it allows you everything. This is compliant with OpenPGP. PGP is pretty good privacy. It was originally developed by Zimmerman, but I think now it's a proprietary software, and this GPG is the counterpart, which is free, so you can get it. It allows performing message signing, encryption, decryption, and so on. This generation of public-private key pairs. Okay, the other important application is Tor. The functionality of Tor is really to provide privacy or anonymous communication. It directs traffic through a volunteer network of several thousand relays. So if a particular user is browsing the net, it kind of tries to prevent somebody from knowing which sites a particular user is visiting. Well, that's actually a different application. Now, in the context of, why do I bring it up in the context of digital signature, is for the following reason. So suppose you want to install Tor. Okay. So you have to download it from some site. So here is a site which says that this is my Tor script. This is the code for Tor. You download it, install it on the machine, and you run it as if it's Tor. But how do you know that that's actually the Tor, the original Tor algorithm? If somebody has a kind of like this man in the middle, somebody has put up a few software, a few programs saying that this is the Tor code. And once you download it, then there is no more security at all. So that's where digital signatures come in. The download side is this HTTPS. I put it in bold because they use this HTTPS connection. So it's a secure HTTP connection. And this is the actual site from which you can download the Tor files. Each download file has a GPG signature. And the signing keys are publicly known and can be imported using this GNU. So if you do that, then you know that you're actually getting the original Tor, not something else. So even though the functionality is not really signatures, but without signatures, this I mean you cannot really trust the code that you have downloaded. And towards the later half of the talk, we'll see how this can be done. Okay, now that's the public key infrastructure. That's the summary of public key infrastructure. Then I'll talk about bitcoins. Now, bitcoins is a form of electronic cash, or electronic cash would be the appropriate thing. And it has been, I'm pretty sure all of you would have heard of bitcoins. Now, this is actually an application of digital signatures. And that's the reason I want to talk about it. Also, one of the most interesting things about bitcoins is that there is no trusted third party. So this CA, the certifying authority, that's a trusted third party. So by using a distributed peer-to-peer network, bitcoins do away with the trusted third party. And that's also a very interesting thing. And in fact, a lot of people have started saying that we don't need PKI anymore. Try to use the model introduced by bitcoins to do away with PKI. Completely do away with PKI. Whether that will be possible or not is a different thing. But I think it's worthwhile that if you talk about digital signatures today, we should talk a bit about bitcoins. So what are bitcoins? You have essentially public keys, which are addresses, which are considered to be addresses. These are public keys. And they are created by a mining procedure. The actual mining procedure doesn't concern us too much. And well, there is some calculation which shows that most about 21 million bitcoins can be created. Each bitcoin is divisible into 10 to the power 8 parts, and if required, divisibility can be increased. So the amount of bitcoins is not a problem. And there is a financial and economic side to it. So if you have too many bitcoins, then there could be inflationary measures and so on, things that I do not understand very well. But if required, it can be increased. You have a total number of bitcoins is fixed, but each bitcoin can be divided as many times as you want. So the amount of currency is not an issue. Okay, so bitcoins are owned by public keys. So the important thing is transfer of ownership. So one public key owns it and wants to transfer it to another public. Now, how did this original public key come to own it? Well, because of some other transaction, well, one transaction would create it and then it would get transferred. That's how money rolls. It's created by a central bank or something. There is no central bank here, of course. It's created and then it's just transactions. So transaction is the transfer of a Bitcoin from one public key to another. Then what you do is, well, you sign the current owner, which is the public key, it signs a hash of the previous transaction, so this transaction record, it signs a hash of that, and the public key of the new. So you take the previous transaction, and once you transfer it to somebody else, takes the public key of the new owner, hashes that using one of the hash functions. Well, it uses SHA-256 for hashing, and then whatever the digest that is obtained, it signs. So it signs, and then it signs. And well, that's the transaction, and that tells now the new owner is this new public. So it's also an anonymous network. You don't need to identify yourself, and that's one of the criticisms against Bitcoins, that it could be used for illegal money, black money, smugglers, and so on. For good or bad, for our purposes, it's just public keys which own Bitcoins and transfer. Transfer of Bitcoin is essentially a digital signature protocol, and Bitcoins use ECTSA for SAT. Now, of course, these are more technical parts, that one transaction could have multiple ins and multiple outs and so on, and there could be a difference between ins and outs, which is the transaction fee. So total Bitcoins coming in, total Bitcoins coming out. Going out, there's a difference, and then there is a transaction fee for that difference. In fact, this is required for, well, I'll come to it. This is the incentive for kind of burying a transaction in what is called a block. Now, the important thing here is how to prevent double spending. So I am the owner of a public. I am the owner of a Bitcoin. I have a public key. I want to give it to somebody else. So I sign it with and sign this. There are say one public key to which I send it, transfer ownership by signing the public key of this owner. Now I could also do it for another public. So I could be double spending the same coin. So the main question is, how do you prevent such double spending? In typical eCash solutions, there would be a centralized trusted authority which would ensure that such things do not happen. Bitcoins avoid that. The Bitcoin protocol avoids that. They use two concepts. One is this notion of a proof of work. The other is a peer-to-peer network, a distributed network. Okay. First, let's look at what is called a proof of work. So a central concept in Bitcoins is, well, first is transaction and then a group of transactions, which is called a block. And blocks are chained together. So you have a first block, and then the entire information in this block is hashed. This hash value is plugged into the next block, and that entire information is hashed, and that hash value is plugged into the next block, and so on. So you create what is called a chain of a chain of blocks. Now the proof of work is in creating this hash value. The goal is to create a hash value of a special form. The special form is that there should be a certain number of leading zeros. Now if you apply a hash function such as SHA-256, what you will get as digest is kind of a garbage. It's a random number. It won't come up with a certain number of leading zeros. So you've got to hash that repeatedly using a slight tweak. That tweak comes by what is called a nonce. So the block itself will have embedded in it a nonce, and you keep on implementing that nonce, so the block slightly changes and keep on hashing it, and you do it until a desired number of leading zeros come. So who would be doing this? There would be nodes, as I said, there would be a distributed network, and each node would be doing this. This is called block mining. It's also called solving the hash value. And why would a node do this? Well, the incentive for block mining is that the miner gets the transaction fee. So the node which first gets the desired number of leading zeros will get all the transaction fees in the transactions that constitute the block. The original mining of Bitcoins is a similar process, and to ensure that there are not too many Bitcoins entering the system, the return for creating a new Bitcoin has a diminishing incentive. So there is a calculation which shows that how it will go, and then that's how you come to this figure of 21 million bitcoins. Now, doing away with the trusted authority is by using a peer-to-peer network where you have nodes, and all nodes keep complete details of all transactions. Now, of course, there are some engineering issues of how much information you need to store and so on. So maybe you can do away with old information. But essentially, nodes keep complete details of all transactions. Once a transaction is created, it is broadcast to the network. And nodes group them into blocks and chain it into blockchain. And once a blockchain and once a new block is solved in the sense that hash value with the leading number of with the desired number of reading zeros is created, this block is then broadcast to the node. So again, all the nodes get the same block, and then they keep on increasing the blocks. So transactions are considered valid when they're embedded into blockchain of a certain node. So they're not immediately considered valid. So they have to get embedded into a blockchain of a certain depth. And ownership of a coin can be verified by querying the network. You query the network, you get to know who is the current owner. The double spending is avoided by maintaining a public history of all transactions, and majority of nodes agreeing which of the two transactions is the first one. So if you have double spending and you have sent it to the network, then ultimately it will get deleted. That this Bitcoin was owned by this particular public key, and it has been spent twice. So, the nodes will get to detect it, and the resolution would be the majority of if the majority of the nodes say that a particular transaction is the proper one, is the first one, well then that's the transaction that will be there. So this is a disincentive for a person who is trying to do a double spending. Now, of course, one can also think of trying to solve this blockchain or working backwards, but working backwards across the blockchain has a lot of computational cost. So it's more feasible for the adversary to actually participate in the network, use its computational resources to participate in the network and create blockchains rather than defeat the system. So anyway, this is a brief summary of Bitcoins, and the main important thing here is that the ownership of a coin is transferred via a digital signature, which is essentially the ECTs. Okay, now is this bit of formalism part. So unless you are very specifically interested in digital signatures, you can take some rest. I'll again get you when we come to the more interesting part about e-commerce and a bit of law. Okay. Now, formalism is and formalism in cryptographic designs is a movement which started in the 90s. There was a concerted movement. Well, of course, the first person to formalize was Scott Shannon way back in 1946-47. But other than that, as a general movement of trying to formalize what is meant by security of different cryptographic constructions, that started somewhere in the 90s. The goal is, well, here is a cryptographic functionality. I want to say what it means for this to be secure. That's the first thing we would like to say. So can I pinpoint a definition? This is the definition of security. And then the second thing is, well, now I have a definition. Can I have a construction which satisfies this definition? So construction, so the second point is to get a construction. The third point is to show that this construction satisfies this definition. Well, that's what is called a proof of security, which is essentially a reduction type proof. So if you are working in digital signatures currently, then if you want to propose a new signature algorithm, you'll have to come up with a construction along with it a proof of security. Otherwise, your people won't guess. It's just that. Right? So it's if you have any plans to work on digital signatures, at least in the academic domain, then you have to be familiar with some amount of formalism. Okay, so what would be a formal security definition? What does it mean to say that a digital signature algorithm or digital signature scheme is secure? This is modeled by what is called an adaptive chosen message attack. This is a game between an adversary and a simulator. So there are two parts. One is the simulator, the other is the adversary. The goal of the adversary is, of course, to be able to forge a message signature. And the simulator would kind of play the role of a genuine user. Okay. So what does the simulator do? The simulator runs a set of algorithms to generate signing and verification keys. Okay. And then gives the verification key to the adversary and keeps the signing. The adversary, okay, so what the adversary can do is, adversary can query the simulator. So it's the chosen message attack. So adversary can query the simulator on messages of its choice. So it says, okay, give me the signature for this message. Gets back the signature. Then it says, based on this message signature, it says, okay, give me the signature on another message. Gets back the new signature and keeps on doing this for several times. Some bound on the number of queries it can make. And at the end, after this interaction with the simulator, it has to output a new message signature pair. And wins if the message signature pair passes the verification with the generated verification. So this is the forging. I mean, the adversary is trying to forge the signature. It's trying to come up with a message signature pair which it has not seen earlier. And to aid in that, the adversary is allowed to query the simulator on messages, adaptively on messages of its own choice. Now, what could be the type of message on which the adversary can forge? Well, based on the type of messages, there are different kinds of signature goals. The first one is this notion of existentially unforgeable. So if the probability of the adversary winning this game, so this is the game, outputs a new message signature pair. There is no constraint on the message. Any random looking message and a corresponding signature, if it can come up with such a message signature pair, then it wins. Well, this kind of forgery is called an existential forgery, and it is existentially unforgeable. If the scheme is said to be existentially unforgeable, if the probability of the adversary winning the game is small. Now, in a different model, the adversary could be, the adversary could say that, okay, I will forge on a particular message. This is called selective forgery. The adversary at the outset chooses the forgery message before receiving the verification. If the adversary can win if the adversary cannot win such a game, it's called selectively unforgeable. Universally unforgeable is the, okay. Well, this is universally forgeable. If the adversary is able to forge signatures on any message, so you cannot forge signature on any message. And a complete threat is if the adversary is able to recover the signing key, then of course it can sign any message of its choice. That's the complete threat of the signature. So these are the four kinds of security notions that one would associate with the signature scheme. And if you can show that a signature scheme is existentially unforgeable under chosen message attack, then it's said to be, then you consider it to be secure. So that's kind of the primary goal of showing a digital signature scheme to be secure. Then how do you actually show that a scheme is secure? Well, the argument is essentially a reductionist security assurance. So the argument goes like this: if some problem pi is computationally hard, then the main protocol is secure. You have to show such a statement. You have to prove such a statement. Now, along with some problem pi, you could also say some smaller protocols is secure. Also, you can make some, and the proof may require to make some additional assumptions, such as random oracle, assuming the hash function to be a random oracle, which is essentially a uniform random function, and so on. But the main goal is, if some problem pi is computationally hard, then the main protocol is secure. Can I prove a theorem such as this? And the proof would go via what is called a game sequence. So the original game is this game G0, and then you have a final game Gk, and Xi is the event that the adversary is successful in game Gi, and we look at these differences. This is the original success probability of the adversary, and it should be very small here, and these differences should also be very small. So the goal, the target of the proof would be to show that, to design such a sequence of games so that this is small and these differences are also small. So this goes for all these proofs essentially have this structure. So this G0 is the game which defines the security of the protocol. So the advantage of the adversary is the probability that A wins in game G0. And GK is designed such that probability A wins in GK is small. And then GI minus 1 and GI do not differ too much. So whether the adversary is playing game GI and GI minus 1, that shouldn't be noticeable to the adversary. I mean, the difference between this probability xi minus 1 and probability xi should be upper bounded by something, some quantity which is small. Okay, that's the kind of the structure. And what are the goals? If you come up with a signature scheme now, what would we be aiming at? Well, one of the aims is to get a short signature. Your signature size requires bandwidth. So if your signature is short, you can show that it's a very short signature, then it requires less bandwidth, and that's the desired goal. Of course, sizes of verification and signing keys, this is also important, especially if you are doing your verification using a smart card, or you're signing using a smart card, then your signing key, having your signing key too small because you're storing it on a smart card. So designing a signature scheme which has small signing keys. Verification is done by server. So having verification keys too small is a goal, but not that important and good. Typically, short signatures and short signing keys are two of the most important goals. And of course, you want fast signing algorithm, fast verification algorithm, and so on. And from the point of view of security, you should be able to base the security of your scheme on some well-studied, standard computationally hard problem. And then when you do this, if pi is hard, then your scheme is secure. This should be tight in the sense that, well, the probability of breaking your scheme is upper bounded by the probability of being able to solve the hard problem, and then that should be almost the same. There shouldn't be a big difference between these two probabilities. And then whether you use random oracles or not, that's also an issue. So these are more technical issues. Now, starting from the year 2000, when Anto Zhu, he introduced this notion of bilinear maps for designing cryptography protocols. Previous to this, bilinear maps were used for solving the discrete log problem of certain kinds of supersimilar elliptic curves. So Zhu was the first person to show that these maps can be used for designing cryptographic protocols. And this has become the main tool for a lot of the currently proposed signature schemes. So I'll talk a bit about that. So E is a map from G1 cross G2 to GT. These three groups are of the same prime order P. And practical examples arise from elliptic curve groups. Now, this was generalized to multilinear maps, which arise from lattices. And recent work has shown that, well, the proposals for multilinear maps that have come up are not secure. But there is nothing, well, for appropriately chosen groups G1, G2, and GT, bilinear maps are still considered to be secure. These maps are called bilinear because of this very interesting property that E of AP and BQ is E of PQ to the power AP. So this is the main algebraic property which makes these maps so very useful in designing, and not only signature, of course, a lot of other protocols. There are other issues of non-degenerate efficiently computing and so on. These are, of course, important. There are, broadly speaking, two classes of bilinear maps. The symmetric maps, G1 equals to G2. Currently, these are not considered to be secure because of recent advances on solving discrete log problem for small characteristic and for fields of small characteristic. For asymmetric, one would look at type 2 or type 3, and in this case, G1 and G2 are different. And currently, type 3 pairings offer the best performance. Best performance both in terms of signing and verification algorithm, and also in terms of signature sizes. Now, I mentioned one of the more important signature schemes proposed by Waters in 2005. Well, yeah, proposed is using type 1 pairings, symmetric pairings. And signatures consist of two group elements. But the disadvantage is that for signing, say, 256-bit messages, the public key consists of about 260 group elements. Okay, I'll finish. And the security is based on the computational Diffie-Hellman assumption. And the water signature is very important because this became the basis for many later proposals. And I just mentioned this one work that I had done with Shonji Chatterjee. We had drifted Waters protocol to type 3 pairings, and our main contribution here was to reduce the size of the public key with some, and the trade-off is some loss of techniques. Okay, so maybe I'll skip this part since I'm running out of time, and I'll come to the maybe the more interesting part. Okay, so we talk about the digital world, e-commerce and e-government, or e-governance. These are the two main buzzwords of the present government and business. And digital signatures form the basic building blocks here. Now there is a legal aspect. So my physical signature has legal backing. So if digital signatures also need legal backing, and if digital signatures are to be accepted, they also need legal backing. And the United Nations, way back in 1996, realized this. They formulated a model law on e-commerce in 1996. And, well, this is the recommendation. They recommended that all states, all members of the UN, give favorable consideration to the model law when they enact or revise their own laws. And in response to this, many countries, more than 60 countries as per 2011 reports, maybe this has increased by now, have enacted laws providing legal force to digital signatures. On the net, I found Mexico has, way back in 2000, in 2000 they didn't really have a new law. They made Mexico made modifications to several existing laws. They give some legal backing to digital signatures. And in 2011, an advanced digital signature law was adopted. I tried to find this law on the net. I couldn't. The time that I could spend on searching, that time I could not discover this law. But it would be interesting to have a look at it. Now for India, there is an Information Technology Act in 2006. This I could find on the net. Reddit. So I'll talk a bit about the Indian IT Act. It provides legal sanctity to digital signatures based upon the principle of equivalence to handwritten signatures. That's the guiding force. It provides for creation and management of PKI in India. And for digital signatures to work, you have to have this structure for PKI. So the IT Act, Indian IT Act, provides for creation of and managing how will PKI work. And of course, once you have a new law, it will have cascaded amendments to several other acts. Of course, it covers other aspects of digital signatures, but hey, that's not very important right now. This is the PKI India framework. It's a 3-level hierarchy. There is a controller of certifying authorities, which is also called the root CA of India. And then there are lower level CAs. The CAs assign certificates to individual users. The CAs cannot assign certificates to lower level CAs. So it's always a 3-level hierarchy. You have a root CA, then you have this next level CAs, and then you have users who get certificates from CAs, directly from CAs. And some of the CAs can give certificates only to specialized users. So for example, for the banking technology, there is this IDRBD, which gives certificates only to the banks. Okay, so that, I think I can skip that. The functions of the CC or the root CA is the creation and maintenance of this root CA of India, and the root CA is a self-signed certificate. So somebody, this trust goes back, but then somebody has to be signing its own certificate. So in India, that's the CCA which does that. And also does a lot of other things, including the maintenance of this National Repository of Digital Certificate, copies of all certificates and certificate revocation lists, mandated with the task of maintaining these things.
This is all the lists existing in the country.
Pardon?
All lists existing in the country.
Yes, that's their task. Now, how they're doing it, I don't know. But the IT Act mandates that they are supposed to do it. Now, here is a very interesting thing from the Indian IT Act that I found. Maybe I'll spend some time on it. So this is a legal definition of what is a secure digital signature. So if by application of a security procedure agreed to by the parties concerned, it can be verified that the digital signature at the time it was affixed was unique to the subscriber affixing it, capable of identifying such subscriber and so on and so forth, then such digital signature shall be deemed to be a secure digital signature. So this is clearly a definition of what it means for a signature to be, a digital signature to be secure. Now that's how the law would define it. But I've given you a different definition. Right? That's a more scientific definition. Now, how does this relate to this definition? I really have no idea. So, I mean, you show that this setup, signing, verification, definition in the code of law will be thrown out. In the code of law, you will have to argue based on this. So that I think is something that one can look at, and there are also some illustrations in the Indian IT Act of what constitutes forgeries. So this is the forgery. There are 16 such illustrations. These are forgeries. Now, is it possible to argue from this scientific definition of secure digital signatures that if a signature scheme satisfies this secure digital this definition, then these forgeries would not arise? Again, it should be possible, but I don't know. I mean, how the scientific thing would kind of dovetail with the legal requirement is something that would be interesting to investigate. Okay, here is the one slide summary of digital versus physical signature. I think this is it's important that we understand the difference. So physical signature is directly linked to what I would say is the cognitive biomechanics. So I'm doing that consciously, and it's a mechanical process, but it's a biomechanical process. Now, digital signature, the signing algorithm, the signing key is completely divorced from the biological entity. It's just a bit string, and most people don't even know that. And it's impossible to know their bit stream. So I mean, that's an important difference. Now, long-term archival is a serious problem. Technology advances. So maybe 20 years from now, what you have signed now, will that be recognizable? Will that be recognizable 100 years from now? Physical signatures made. And then you sign treaties. So if you're signing treaties, you use digital signature. May not be a good idea. So it's unlikely that digital signatures will completely replace physical signatures. There are scenarios where physical signatures are going to be important. But of course, they offer a wider range of functionalities, things that are skilled. There's a digital signature zoo, a lot of things that one can do with this new promise. Okay, now I'll just 5 minutes more. Good. So I'll talk about this. Cryptanalysis is always more interesting than cryptography. Things actually break. Okay. The first thing is this malware called Flame. It was reported in 2012, and according to certain reports, it was already existing maybe 4 or 5 years earlier. So this is supposedly one of the most sophisticated malwares till now. It can, once it affects your computer, it will grab all your information. It can activate your this CCD camera. It can become an attractor for Bluetooth device. You download things from open Bluetooth device and send it across to the net. So once it affects your computer, and you become kind of a zombie. I mean, there's nothing that you can do about it. Now, how does this malware get into the computer? Well, that's where the attack comes in. So the attackers identified a Microsoft certificate that was used for signing code updates. So if you remember, I talked about Tor. Tor downloads code. Now the code is signed. Okay. So Microsoft also sends you updates across the air. You can update your software, your Windows system over the air. And this code, this code fragments are also signed. And there is a corresponding certificate. So the attackers, they identified a Microsoft certificate that was used for signing code updates. The signing algorithm used the weak MD5 hash function. So they did not actually break the signatures. So it's a hash then sign. And the hashing algorithm was MD5. Now MD5 has been known to me for quite some time, but because of resistance to change, it was not actually replaced. So the signing algorithm used this MD5, and what the attacker could do was, the attackers created a new collision for MD5. Now this part is, this is what, about this part Mark Stevens says, that it's based on world-class cryptanalysis. So chosen prefix collisions for MD5 has been done in the academic world. It has been published, and one of the lead authors of that paper is Mark Stevens. He has done a forensic tool on the collision that has been reported for Flame, and his conclusion is that this is a new kind of chosen prefix attack. So it's not some hacker who is just doing and just trying to bypass the system and somehow get into it. There is some good mathematics going on behind. And in that context, he makes this remark: the design of Flame is partly based on world-class cryptanalysis. So designing this chosen prefix collision is a serious academic cryptanalytic work, which kind of lends support to the view that this must have been backed by a powerful nation state. Now, based on this prefix collision, this was used to fraudulently sign some components of the malware, make them appear to have originated from Microsoft. So the components, when the malware comes in, you verify it looks like it's come from Microsoft. The computer trusts it, and then it's completely wrong. So this is one forgery. The forgery is by getting a new collision for MD5. Now, fake certificates, there are two reported, I've come across two reported fake certificates. One is this Komodo, and the other is DigiNotar. Both were reported in 2011. Komodo is a reputed certificate selling authority, and Komodo certificates are still used in your browser. So if you look into your browser, there is an option, depending on which browser you use, you can look at, you can find all the certificates that are present in your browser and see certificates by Komodo. Well, Komodo also gave out kind of licensed out their activities, which they call registered authorities, and a user account of one of its registered authorities was breached, and then some fake certificates were issued for several popular domains such as Yahoo, Google, Skype, and so on. So Google.com or Gmail, so fake certificates were issued. Now, the thing about these fake certificates is that, well, www.gmail.com. Okay. Now this, you have a certificate for such a domain, but the resolution of this domain name would be done by a DNS server. So unless you can have the DNS server in your control, I mean, it could get resolved to some numbers, and the connection would go to that particular number. If you can control the DNS, then you can change the numbers, and then it will come to you where you present the fake certificate. Now, it was not clear that the DNS servers were compromised. In fact, the CEO of Komodo mentioned that without controlling DNS servers, this was not very useful. But the thing is that it was attacked, and it was attacked via one of these registered authorities. DigiNotar is a more sad story. Was hacked, and fake certificates were issued. About 500 have been reported, and then the company went bankrupt. There's nothing more that it could do. And the last, of course, with anything related to cryptanalysis, got to bring in Snowden. 2013, reported by Snowden in 2013, there is an alleged man-in-the-middle attack by NSA. So an internet router was hacked, and certain targeted traffic was rerouted. Okay. Now, if it's rerouted, well, it could be rerouted, but then you have to have some fake certificate. Like it's similar to this Komodo thing. Well, you need, I mean, the DNS, unless you have control over the DNS server, you cannot reroute the traffic. So what they did was they hacked into one of the routers and then redirected the traffic, but then they also used a fake certificate to authenticate like something like I think it's Google.com. So they had a fake certificate for Google.com, and then the redirected traffic would come to this Google.com and would get this Google.com certificate and believe it to be correct. Now, how did they get the fake certificate? Well, there are two theories. One is by Matthew Green, who suggests that the NSA could have obtained their own signing key from a less trustworthy CA. So CAs cannot have absolute trust on CAs. And Bruce Nair suggests that the attack could be linked to the fake certificate issue from the beginning of the attack. So maybe during that phase, it could have got, NSA could have got themselves. But nobody knows how such a fake certificate was issued. And this gave them a classical man in the middle attack. Okay, so this is where I will end. And if I pronounce this correctly, gracias por su amable atención.
Thank you, Professor Sarkar, for the interesting talk. And I'm sure that you have many questions, but we are going to be creative in this time, and then the questions are going to be in the toast outside, so you can have nice wine and food, and then ask questions. Okay.